Hey, what's up you fucking nerds? Welcome to the Avengenerd. Before we get started with today's topic, I did want to show off my brand new statue.
Oh yeah, look at how cool that is. Sweet. Show and tell over.
One of the reasons why I love Spider-Man so much is because I grew up with it as a kid. Which brings me to my next question. Have you ever experienced an event in your life where you tell yourself, yes, I can die now? Well, one of those times for me was when I met Stan Lee at one of his last Comic-Cons in Los Angeles in 2017, where he and Mark Bagley signed my Amazing Spider-Man 361. The only other time I could ever remember feeling that way is when I purchased one of my dream rifles, the FN Scar 17, and meeting my wife, I guess. Still smells like a brand new car. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I haven't taken it out shooting as much as I'd like to. But it has made me fall in love with the 308. So I've recently had that life-fulfilling moment happen to me again, because I just purchased another 308 rifle that I've been after for a long time. And I'm not gonna lie, movies, video games, and comic books have contributed greatly to my enthusiasm for firearms. And thus we have the IWI Galil Ace.
Oh yeah.
And while ammo is not impossible to get in the Midwest, it is fairly expensive. Right now I'm paying about $1 a round for 308, which is pretty expensive. To put it into perspective, a person working minimum wage would have to work 3 hours just to shoot a full magazine. Pretty ridiculous if you ask me. And that's why we should start paying $15 minimum wage, so I can go to McDonald's and order regular tea and still get sweet tea. Then I go to take a bite of my cheeseburger, bam! Fish sandwich. The Galil Ace is essentially supposed to be a modernized and improved AK rifle. Looking around for AK guys. But I say modernized AK because the original Israeli Galil was inspired by the AK platform. So it is going to have a lot of similarities. Some people might say that the Galil is no scar killer, but for someone who owns both, I see a lot of promising qualities that the Galil Ace offers. So I thought it'd still be pretty cool to do a tabletop review and go over the specs and see what they both have to offer. And hopefully in the near future, if the Democrats haven't come for our AR-15s and our AK-47s, not an AR, not an AK, you guys are fucking screwed, and ammo prices come down a bit, I can do a side-by-side range test and see how the Galil stacks up with the Scar. So let's take a closer look to how a $2,000 rifle compares to a $3,700 rifle. So like the original Galil, the receiver is milled, which is supposed to help with the sturdiness, giving it less flex than the stamped receiver would. Now I've never been a huge AK guy, so I have not tested that theory or put it through a slow-mo test to capture any flex in the firearm, but I've definitely seen AK videos where the firearm flexes like rubber, which I would imagine affects the accuracy. When it comes to the lower assembly of the receiver, it's going to be polymer, which includes the grip, trigger guard, magwell, and magazine. The grip does come with a storage compartment, so you can store anything from batteries, or if you're like me, M&Ms. The trigger is 2-stage and it feels really good. Not a whole lot of take up before you hit the wall, and just a negligible amount of force before it breaks. One of the differences you're going to find from the original Galil is the mag release, where the original Galil utilizes the traditional style you find in AKs. I actually prefer this setup on the Ace, mainly because the placement of the mag release allows me to release and reload quicker. It's also ambidextrous, so it can accommodate left-handed people. One thing I will point out is that this rifle is not completely ambidextrous friendly. As a matter of fact, the mag release is probably about the only ambi-friendly component of this firearm. If you look at the placement of the safety lever, it's fairly comfortable and easily accessible with your thumb if you're a right-handed shooter. Left-handed shooters may not find the safety lever comfortable as it does not allow you to properly rest your finger on the trigger. I can see this being uncomfortable for some people, especially during a long day of shooting a heavier set rifle. I do like that the magwell is slightly flared, which makes reloading a little smoother. Another factor that makes this rifle better than rifles like the Scar is that it uses PMags, which are relatively inexpensive and easy to find. As I mentioned before, this rifle caters to more of a right-handed shooter as the charging handle rests on the left side of the receiver. The shape of the charging handle feels good. It's nice and bulky at the same time low profile, but it should still be easy to grip even if you're wearing gloves. I know some people don't like reciprocating charging handles, something that AKs and Scar platforms have, whereas AR platforms and rifles like the Bushmaster HCR have non-reciprocating charging handles. But it's personal preference and I don't mind. What's neat about the Galil is that you'll notice the dust cover is retractable, so it seals up the receiver and moves out of the way when the charging handle reciprocates. This is a nice feature as it presumably does a better job of keeping out debris. Let's talk a little bit about the stock, probably one of my favorite parts of this rifle. Like AK platforms, this rifle utilizes a long stroke gas piston system, Unlike ARs, there's no buffer tube, which allows it to be a side folding stock. Even folded, you can comfortably shoot it, but keep in mind that the stock does have to be extended so that it is out of the way of the trigger guard. Also, the cheek riser might have to come off depending on how far you extend the stock in order to allow the spent casings to eject. The stock is very ergonomic and extremely sturdy. As a matter of fact, when you first get this rifle, it takes a little bit of strength to fold it. Fully extended, the rifle measures about 39.5 inches. The stock also comes with a removable cheek riser which stays in a fixed position when mounted. This could be a bad thing as it does not come off with your hands very easily, but it's great for those who choose to run a higher profile optic. I will say that if you want an optic that will co-witness with the irons, the cheek riser will get in the way. Along with that, the rear and front sights both have tritium in them and they do sit fairly low, so if you want a true co-witness, you might want to consider an RMR. Underneath the dust cover, some of the components will look very similar to an AK for those of you familiar with the platform. But there are some differences when it comes to taking down and reassembling the rifle, and since it's a new rifle to me, I won't attempt that at the moment. You do have a 4 Picatinny railing system that allows you to mount accessories. However, there is not a lot of room on the bottom and side rails, so you are limited to how much you can put on there. But I personally don't run too many accessories, so for me it works. As you can see, if you remove the handguards, you'll see there isn't much room. But for those who feel the need to have more rail space, they do sell M-LOK extended handguards for this rifle. If you look at the Picatinny rails on each side, you'll notice an opening. That's to house the wiring for pressure activated lights if you choose to mount one, which I think is a nice touch. Comparing it to the SCAR's receiver is made with a hard anodized monolithic aluminum. So the concept of a milled receiver is the same since it is forged from a single block of metal, which is supposed to keep it stronger. But with the SCAR, the manufacturing involves an electromagnetic process that hardens the aluminum, which makes it stronger than stainless steel. It also makes it more resistant to scratches. Like the Galil, there are a lot of polymer components to this rifle which contribute to the reduction of the weight. The SCAR is about a pound heavier than the Galil, weighing at about 9 pounds without a loaded mag or optic. The only thing I've changed so far in the lower was the grip, which comes with a typical A2 style pistol grip. I had that swapped with an Ergo. One of the main advantages off the top is the versatility of the operating system. Unlike the Galil, the SCAR is fully ambidextrous with the ergonomic mag release and safety controls. The charging handle can also be mounted on the right or left side, and like the Galil, is reciprocating. One negative aspect about the SCAR is that it uses proprietary magazines, which cost about $50 each. As for the trigger, we're looking at a 1-stage trigger, and I personally have no complaints. It feels decent, although I do prefer the 2-stage trigger of the Galil. The squeeze on the SCAR does feel lighter, but when it comes to the handling, I do like the ability to always anticipate the shot that 2-stage provides. Similar to the Galil, the SCAR uses a gas piston system, except that the SCAR uses a short stroke system, which is going to play a big role in reducing recoil. This also means that the SCAR does not have a buffer tube like AR platforms, and therefore the stock has side folding capabilities. A lot of people do complain that the SCAR stock doesn't feel as sturdy and oftentimes end up swapping them out for an ACR stock. I personally don't mind the UGG boot as it works for me and I find it more aesthetically pleasing. The stock also comes with a cheek riser which can be adjusted to 2 settings, up or down. Fully extended, the overall length of the rifle is 38.5 inches. The Picatinny railing system for both rifles are similar as far as how much room you have for accessories. One big difference they do have is that the top rail of the SCAR is a solid piece, whereas the Galil is 2 separate pieces. Not a big deal, but it is something to consider when selecting optics and placement. It could be a problem if you decide to go with a red dot and magnifier. The iron sights on the SCAR are phenomenal, some of the better iron sights I've used in a rifle. The only con is when you choose to mount an optic with low eye relief such as an ACOG or this Bravo 5 that I have. In order for it to not parallax, it does have to sit pretty far back on the railing, rendering the rear sight useless. Which is not a deal breaker, especially when you're running a magnified optic and co-witnessing is not a factor. The brake on the SCAR works extremely well as there is a significant reduction in muzzle rise. A con of the brake is the concussive force it expels, which anyone standing to your side can attest to. So there are a lot of qualities that the Galil has that are comparable to that of the SCAR, and it seems like most of the cons might affect primarily left-handed people. But there's no question that this is definitely a high-quality firearm. Both rifles are still fairly pricey, but when you consider the Galil is about half the price of the SCAR, then you factor optics and other upgrades, the SCAR starts to get even pricier. I will say one thing about the SCAR though that makes it worth owning more than almost any other rifle. When 9 times out of 10 you go to the range and everybody else is shooting their cute little ARs and AK-47s, and you're one of the only guys that pulls out one of these bad boys, that to me is a price worth paying. But hopefully this video gave you some insight on what both platforms have to offer. And if the current administration doesn't completely screw us, shit, what am I saying? I'm already paying $45 in gas in the Midwest. What the f? But anyway, in the near future, I will be taking both rifles out to the range and seeing how they stack up to one another. But that does it for me today at the Avengenerd. I'm gonna go take a boating trip and take all my firearms with me and hope nothing happens. Take it easy, nerds. I'll see you next time we assemble. Peace.